2016 UNESCO King Sejong Literacy Prize. He is also a co-author and editor of UNESCO's Global Publication Languages Matter, Global Guidance on Multilingual Education, released on February 21, 2025. Today, we are truly fortunate to learn from his wealth of experience and global perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Kirk Person, who will now deliver his plenary talk virtually via Zoom.
Hello, my name is Kirk Person, and it is a privilege indeed to be addressing you at the International Sanrokan Festival on the Diversity of Cultural Expression through Inclusive Governance and Education. I truly regret that I am not able to join you in person because I know I would learn so much from all of you who are attending this important event. And what I would like to do is to hopefully give you some encouragement by sharing with you some things that are happening on the regional and international levels related to mother tongue-based multilingual education. Now, as a way of explaining how I got involved with this, I would actually like to honor my mother. I am recording this on International Women's Day, and this is, of course, part of International Women's Month. And my mom had a huge impact on me. She was a first grade teacher, and she was very committed to teaching all her children. Now, I'm going to show you a shocking photograph of me with my siblings. I think you can probably tell which one is me. On the photo, sitting right next to me, is my brother Tai, who is half Vietnamese and half black, found by a priest in a garbage bin in Saigon. Then my other brother, Lon, who is fully Vietnamese, and finally my sister, who is indigenous or Native American or Indian, as some are called. So from a very early age, my parents did so much to emphasize the cultures of my siblings. And so I grew up wishing that I could be Asian or I could be indigenous so that I would have something special about me, just as they had their very special identity. So perhaps it was destiny that my wife and I would end up buying our very first house as newlyweds in a small ethnic minority village in northern Thailand, where the Bisu language was spoken. Now, we had been invited there by the Bisu to work on language preservation, to learn their language, to help them to develop an alphabet, and then to develop books in their language so that their children would remember the language, and also to hold literacy classes for children and adults. Now, living in a bamboo house, as those of you who've lived in a bamboo house know, you hear everything that's going on in your neighbor's house. And they hear everything that's going on in your house as well. And in our house, we had the privilege of hearing many language policy discussions. Our next door neighbors had 3 children. The first child was a son. They spoke to in Bisu pretty much all the time. And again, we could tell that because we could hear them all the time, talking and laughing and singing in the evenings, having a wonderful time. But then a language policy decision was made when their second child was born. And that language policy, decided by the father, was that they would not speak Bisu to the newborn baby. They would only speak Thai, thinking that that would help their child get ahead in the Thai education system and get a great job in the future. The house next door to ours fell silent. There wasn't as much to talk about. It was almost like a dark cloud had come on the house since they decided that they would only speak in Thai. Then about 10 years later, they had a surprise daughter. And during that time, they had seen that the boy who they raised only in Thai was not doing well at school at all. His older brother, who they'd raised bilingually in Bisu and Thai, became an army officer. The next brother didn't do well at school. And finally, this daughter, who was born many years later, they established a new language policy. Actually, the mother did. She decided she was going to speak Bisu to her daughter. That daughter is now an engineering student in northern Thailand's most prestigious university. And that really, to me, emphasizes the fact that teaching a child to speak the ethnic minority language, to speak the language of the village, to speak the local language, always helps and never hurts their cognitive development, their socio-emotional development, and ultimately their education. Because what we saw playing out in that little bamboo house next door to our little bamboo house is something that we see all over the world. Now, I work on a slightly different level of language policy issues now with the Asia Pacific Multilingual Education Working Group, which some of you are familiar with. It's based in Bangkok. The MLE Working Group had its beginnings in a conference in 2003 on language development, language revitalization, and multilingual education. At that point, there were 4 sponsors: SIL, Mahidol University in Thailand, UNESCO, and UNICEF. But the response to this first conference was so strong that things began to expand. Now, one of the things that was talked about a lot at that first conference was how children, when they're trying to bridge from one language to another, if they don't have some special help, well, many of them don't make the leap. They're unable to fully acquire the skills in the second language and the second culture that they need. So what is really needed is what has been termed the MLE bridge, and I know many of you are familiar with this, starting with listening, speaking, reading, and writing the mother tongue, and then developing those same skills in that same order in the second or third language, and thereby developing a bridge that enables the children to be meaningful parts of both cultural groups, both social groups. So excitement about this concept has grown over the past 20 years, and we see now that the Multilingual Education Working Group has a lot more members, including people like the World Bank and even the British Council. Now, as many of you know, the British Council makes a lot of money selling English learning materials, but even they have recognized in several publications that it does not make sense to push too much English on children when they're not ready for it. And in fact, it can be counterproductive. So the British Council also supports the teaching of the mother tongue before adding additional languages, such as the national language or international languages. The MLE Working Group has 3 main functions: to promote positive MLE policies and practices across the Asia-Pacific region, to strengthen MLE knowledge and information, and also to just serve as to strengthen the MLE networks and partnerships that we see across this region. A lot of this is done because UNESCO and UNICEF are involved. So the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly goal number 4, is very much in focus. And some of you might be familiar with the indicators, because each goal also has indicators to tell whether a nation is achieving that goal. And there is one thematic indicator which asks countries to report on the percentage of students in primary education whose first or home language is the language of instruction. Now, I've not checked the records recently to see whether the Philippines is reporting on this indicator or not. But I look forward to researching that more, because I think, well, it would be very interesting, especially to people like yourselves. The MLE Working Group also puts out numerous publications. You can find those online. We maintain a website with news about MLE activities, and we also have a database from 46 countries trying to keep somewhat up to date on the status of language policies in those countries, and also the main stakeholders who are working in those areas, working in MLE and related language issues. Now, some of you have been to the MLE conferences that we have hosted in Bangkok. There have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those to date. And we can see through that series just sort of the way in which MLE has developed throughout Southeast Asia, from kind of a small idea from small community centers to being more something that's, in at least some cases, supported by government policies. Now, each of the most recent conference was in 223, and those of you who were there might recall that our keynote speaker was not an educator or a linguist, but an economist, Dr. Jeffrey Sachs. Now, Dr. Sachs is one of the most famous economists in the world, and he has also been a special advisor to the past 3 Secretary Generals of the United Nations. So very scholarly, very well known. He's the guy you call if you want your country to get rich. He helped many of the Eastern European countries such as Poland. He's also done a lot the past 10 years helping Indonesia develop an economic plan. So why was he speaking at an MLE conference? Well, it went back to 2022 when there was a major conference at the United Nations in New York City. And at the entrance to the United Nations, UNICEF had put up this display. Only 1 in 3 10-year-olds globally can read and understand a simple story. So everyone who went into the UN during that time saw this, and many of the speakers inside the UN referred to this sign, including Jeffrey Sachs. When he was giving his address, he was angry. Why are we failing to teach so many children the most basic skills to be able to read? After his talk, I actually had the opportunity to run up and talk to him for literally 45 seconds. And what I said was, one of the reasons that so many children are not learning to read and write is that they are educated in a language they don't really understand. And it's almost impossible to learn to read and write in a language you don't speak fluently. And Jeffrey Sachs stared at me and said, "Why has no one ever told me this?" Can you imagine? A very high-ranking, famous person, well-read. He often talks about the economic dimensions of education, saying that with another 50 billion globally, we could solve all the education problems of the world. But he'd never heard about the link between language of instruction and basic reading. So I sent him he gave me his card. He asked me to send him some more information. So I sent him this World Bank report. Some of you are familiar with it. Again, encouraging that the World Bank is supportive of MLE based on this finding that maybe as much as 40% of the global population does not receive education in a language they speak or understand. Jeffrey Sachs' talk definitely had an impact on the policymakers who were at our 2023 conference. Now, every time there is a conference, UNESCO and UNICEF invite ministers, deputy ministers, or secretaries in the Filipino case to the meetings. And every time they're asked to think about MLE in their country and how children are doing. For the past 2 conferences, that high-level policy working group has come up with a statement. In 2019, it was the Bangkok Statement on Language and Inclusion. In 2023, the Bangkok Priorities for Action. And it was so encouraging to see that the Bangkok Priorities for Action actually have resulted in action. Action coming from SIMEO, the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization. Their secretariat is in Bangkok, and of course, many of their top leaders have come from the Philippines. So just 2 or 3 weeks ago, SIMEO released what they're calling the SIMEO MLE Roadmap. Again, this is based on the things that were learned through their